Greetings all, it's the 24th of September 2022 and today we're taking a look at Tropical Storm Ian because it is looking like a major threat to Cuba and potentially Florida as we go forward over the next several days. So let's check in on this thing. Ian is currently under a bit of northerly shear as it has been since Genesis. You can see the upper level cirrus. Northerly shear means that the upper level winds are blowing out from the north over the storm, and you can see the cirrus clouds here going off and moving down towards the south. It's an indication of that northerly shear. In any case, the mid to upper level circulation is a bit displaced off the low level center. That's not good for intensification, but unfortunately over time the shear is forecast to decrease and intensification is very likely. The system is currently heading towards the west, as you can see. It's kind of gradually edging this direction, but that's because there's a small narrow thin ridge over Hispaniola. It's kind of like this in the mid and upper levels, and we can look at that actually here with the 300 millibar winds. You can see the ridge. Now as the storm moves towards the west, it's going to get to the end of that ridge and then start turning towards the north, and that's where the problems really are going to arise. Let's take a look at what that turn looks like. This is the European center model and these are the surface winds. I'll start off now. Here it's 18 UTC at the start on the 25th. As we move forward, the storm begins its turn up towards the north. You can see the wind strengthening as it approaches Georgetown. Now these are the Cayman Islands, and that will be the first area that is at risk of the severe winds, while Jamaica will be more at risk of the really heavy rains. But you can see the center in the European center model does pass very close to Georgetown over the Cayman Islands as it's intensifying, and then after that it moves more towards the north and then passes over far western Cuba. Now the location of the landfall on Cuba is a bit uncertain. The other models we'll see in a moment actually take the storm a little bit further to the west. Then it's coming up and heading into the Gulf of Mexico and towards Florida. We'll get to that in a moment. To get an idea of the intensification, let's take a look at the Hurricane Wharf. Now with the Hurricane Wharf, you always have to bear in mind that it is just one model, high resolution. It has been prone to over intensify storms in some occasions, but let's take a look at it as we go forward. We're now looking at September 25th, 12Z. You have to take off a number of hours to get to the local time. And you see the storm intensifying into a tropical storm. Once we see the purples, that's it, a hurricane by 03 UTC, and there are the Cayman Islands up towards the north of the storm. The Hurricane Wharf does edge the storm a little bit towards the west compared to the European center model, which keeps the storm, as it's intensifying, away from the Cayman Islands. At least the hurricane strength winds are away from the Cayman Islands. But that is not the case in the other models, which are taking it closer. So you can see the Hurricane Wharf is really taking it significantly west of the ECMWF, actually taking it just clipping the western end of Cuba with the right side of the eye wall. At this point, the Hurricane Wharf has it as a major hurricane, and then it passes into the Gulf of Mexico. Now this track is doubly problematic because it avoids the land, which might have just knocked down the intensity a dash as it crossed the land. Taking this track through the gap in the islands here would allow the storm to maintain a higher intensity. You can see the Hurricane Wharf is now up into 115 knots or higher as it takes it forward, and that is the end of the forecast which is currently coming in. The previous forecast, I'll just show where that actually ended up at landfall. It actually made landfall over in the Florida Panhandle, so it's not actually taking it because it's already edged it quite a way to the west. The end result for the Hurricane Wharf is to keep the storm It's actually weakening it slightly there, but then re-strengthening, maybe a replacement cycle or a little bit of cold water. Not sure what that is, but it does take the storm into the Florida Panhandle just at the end of the forecast there. That's September 29th. So with that in mind, okay, so the Hurricane Wharf had the storm going into the Florida Panhandle. The National Hurricane Center have the storm coming in here, and you'll see why they've gone for that position. If we look for the ECMWF, I mean, they're looking at lots of models, obviously, but the European Center model is a good one to compare with the Hurricane Wharf rather than the GFS. The GFS is the initialization condition for the Hurricane Wharf, as far as I know. And so the ECMWF is more of an independent analysis model to look at, and that's why it is actually quite different. As you can see, the storm actually comes in towards central southern Florida. Now that is quite different from the Hurricane Wharf, which is up here. Look at the length of the difference in landfall location. So we're really going to have to wait on this storm in order to determine the area of impact, and the National Hurricane Center have explicitly stated that in their discussion, that there is uncertainty in this track as the storm moves into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, hell, it hasn't even formed yet into a hurricane, so we're a little ways off yet. Let's get back to the more immediate threat to Cuba, and I'm just going back to the Hurricane Wharf, not to look at the track specifically, but to look at the intensity and the intensification, because if the European Center model is more accurate with the track, and the NHC track is more accurate, then the storm would actually be passing further to the east than is being indicated here. The intensification may be more accurate. That fits with the NHC discussion that has intensification occurring over this period, with a possible landfall in western Cuba at major hurricane strength. The Hurricane Wharf during this period is intensifying the storm from, looks like, about 90 knots. Does that seem right? Yeah, 90 knots to over 110 knots. A major hurricane, 110 to 115 knots. Major hurricane passing into this area. So if that were edged slightly to the east, then we're looking at a major hurricane landfall in western Cuba. And even in this scenario, of course, major hurricane winds on the far western tip of Cuba. So we're really going to be interesting to see how, as the new data comes in, how this hurricane is turning towards the north, how much it turns and how quickly it turns. It's going to be absolutely critical for Cuba and Florida, and more immediately the Cayman Islands. When we talk about major hurricane, what we're talking about, and you can see it's written here in the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, talking about category 3 or above. And category 3, even in itself, they have it as devastating damage will occur, and then there's a description of the different damages expected at the various intensities. Since we've been talking about the uncertainty in the track and the critical nature of it, here are the model spaghetti diagram of all the models, and they do seem to have a collection of tracks that are focusing in on western Cuba, rather to the east of where the Hurricane Wharf was indicating. So that is, you can see why the NHC has that track in towards this region of Florida. But that H Wharf is taking it into the Panhandle, so definitely keep an eye on it. What we should definitely look at are the ocean temperatures. We're looking for warm pockets of water, cooler pockets, these warm eddies, and oh my god, it is very, very red. Let's deal with this color scale. Okay, that's better. Now I've compressed the color scale so that the temperatures are only between 26 and 32 Celsius. So now we can see that there is temperatures between around 30 Celsius, 29 to 30 roughly in the track of the storm, there is a pocket of very warmer waters over 30 Celsius to the south of Cuba. That could be a problem for intensification as the storm approaches into this area if it does take that track. And there is also a rather unfortunate looking pocket of warm water to the southwest of Florida, and that is over 30 Celsius. So that will be a potential energy reservoir for the storm if it passes over this region, which it looks reasonably likely to do so. There are cooler waters off the coast, but probably, there's slightly cooler, but all of these are well above. These are in the order of 29 Celsius, so it's still very, very warm. These are fractional differences because of the squash color bar, but we can see these the real hot spots. And certainly the whole area to the south of Cuba is very warm water, and this will be capable of sustaining a major hurricane, no problem. Besides the obscene winds, we've got an issue with the rain, a major issue for these islands. Now, the local rainfall over islands like Jamaica, which has significant topography, could be localized very much higher than what is being predicted by these broader scale models. But let's take a look at this. This is the 24-hour rainfall. We can see the pocket of high rain over Ian down here in the south. Keep an eye out on the Cayman Islands and then into Cuba here and Jamaica. We go to the 3-day total rainfall, then we can see as the storm moves up, we've got higher totals moving up as the storm approaches. We've got over 100 millimeters heading into the Cayman Islands. And you go to 5 days, then you've got the storm passing over Cuba and into Florida with over 200 millimeters of rain there in the approach to Florida. Now, what else here? So the GFS, actually, if you flick between these two models, you'll see the change in the track, with the global forecasting system model taking the storm further to the west, and the rain totals show that and they're actually higher rain totals, and that takes it through that channel. And that's you can see now why the hurricane wharf is taking it on this track. It gets that nudge from the GFS, which is its boundary condition. I think that is true. So there you go, that is our very quick look at Tropical Storm Ian. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe, and come and join us at a super friendly Discord. I'm on Twitter at ustorm.org, and I will see you in the next one, which might be tomorrow.